Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to my Resident Evil franchise review. I'm going to cut right to the chase once again. Today I'll be reviewing 2007's Resident Evil Apocalypse. Oh boy, Resident Evil Apocalypse. Resident Evil Extinction. Excuse me. Still hung up on Apocalypse. I've watched it 3 times in the last 2 days. Resident Evil Extinction is what I'll be reviewing from 2007. Oh boy, Resident Evil Extinction. So my nostalgia for Resident Evil Extinction, honestly, it's a little fuzzy because I don't remember a lot of the details from when I saw this movie. But I remember seeing the trailer to the film on some DVD that I had rented from Block. Actually, no, it was Hollywood Video. One of very, very few times I ever went to Hollywood Video. And my stepdad was watching that film with me, and I begged him to rent Resident Evil Extinction because I was still really into Resident Evil at the time. And so he did a few weeks later, and he and I sat down and watched it. Yeah, so okay, good. It's not broken. No, sorry. Anyway, so me and my stepdad sat down to watch Resident Evil Extinction, and let me tell you something. This movie blew my fucking mind. Absolutely blew my mind. It was one of the best movies that I had ever seen in my life at the time. Again, despite the fact that this movie apparently is not very well received. Currently has a 22% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Metacritic gave it a mixed or average score of 41 out of 100. Which I really do think is a shame, because I think this movie is just utterly fantastic, in my opinion. So much so, this is my favorite of the Resident Evil movies, without a complete shadow of a doubt. Even though I've seen Apocalypse many more times than Resident Evil Extinction, Extinction is the one that stuck with me the most in such a positive way. I really do think Resident Evil Extinction is the best of the series. It's certainly my favorite of the series. And I really do wish that this movie would get a lot more respect than it already does. Or more does not. So, I'm going to jump into the plot. The plot of Resident Evil Extinction. Hang on a second. Sorry about that. The plot of Resident Evil Extinction begins with what you may think is stock footage from the first Resident Evil film. Sorry, I got a message from my friend. But it turns out that this is not stock footage from the first film. Alice wakes up in the shower and puts on her red dress from the first film, but she immediately, once she starts walking around, encounters the laser grid room, and right as she's about to be cross-cut like the captain of the commandos in the first film, she escapes in the air duct and plops down into what looks like a hospital. She's nearly cut in half, but she stopped by pretty much a guillotine that comes down through the hallway, but she sets it off with a gurney. She gets past that, but she is killed by a bounding mine, which is which is a type of device where if you step on a trigger device, it pops up out of the ground and shoots a massive spray of bullets really fast in a 360-degree pattern. She is hit, and her body is dumped by Umbrella scientists into a pit in the middle of the Mojave Desert, which is filled with Alice copies, revealing themselves to be Alice clones. There's dozens of them. I'd say there's at least 50 of them inside this pit. The camera zooms out to show a shack in the middle of the Mojave Desert, camouflaging the city's above-ground entrance, and with the rest of the facility located underground, it's pretty much just another hive, surrounded by a really high fence and hundreds of thousands of zombies surrounding it. We then find out that, unfortunately, despite Umbrella's best efforts to contain the T-virus in Raccoon City, it turned out to be unsuccessful, and the T-virus did spread. To quote the film, the T-virus spread and consumed the U.S. within a matter of weeks, and within months the world. But the virus didn't just kill off human life. Lakes and rivers dried up, forests became deserts, and whole continents just became nothing but desolate wastelands. And is at this point where people just realize, you know what, if you want to stay alive, just keep on moving, stay on the road. Avoid large cities or towns, because eventually the zombies will just be drawn to you. The real Alice, whom escaped from the Umbrella facility at the end of the previous film, intercepts a radio transmission coming from what looks like a news place called KLKB. She investigates this place, but it turns out this transmission was sent out by bandits, who consists of like 3 dudes and 1 old fat bitch. At first they try to rape her, but Alice kills one of them by kicking him in the neck, or kicking him in the face, snapping his neck, and he gets impaled by his own kukri knife. Oh my god, the kukri knives. I'll get to those in just a minute. They knock her out, and they try to feed her to zombie dogs. But she escapes her bonds, kills 2 of the dogs, wraps up 3 more in electric cords, but they pull themselves free, and they kill the bandits. But Alice escapes, recovers her weapons, including the 2 kukri knives. Oh my god. And continues on her way with her motorcycle. While this is going on, there is a convoy of, I think it's like 40-something survivors, who just keep on going down, draining small towns and gas stations as they go along for supplies. And they stop at a desert trail motel and decide to hole up for the night. The group consists of Carlos, LJ from the previous 2 films, as well as Claire Redfield for Resident Evil 2. The game, I mean. This is the first appearance of Claire Redfield, played by Ali Larder. And then the new members of this group include Kmart, played by Spencer Locke, Mikey, played by Christopher Egan, Chase, played by Lyndon Ashby, Otto, played by Joe Hursley, and Nurse Becky, played by Ashanti Douglas, among others. And while at this motel, LJ is bitten by a zombie. After killing a cop zombie that startled me when I first saw this movie, by snapping his neck, he sits down on a bed and sees a zombie getting up and it's about to kill him, but he shoots at it. Turns out it's a mirror. So he gets jumped by this female zombie with her dead rotten tits hanging out. See? And he's chopped. Carlos kills her, but LJ decides to keep the bite a secret for some reason. I don't know why. It's real. LJ doesn't feel like the same in this film. He could just be jaded because he's living in a shitty world, but he just doesn't feel like the same funny guy from the previous film. A few days later, the group is, or not a few days later, I think it's like 1 or 2 days later. The group is attacked by a giant. Actually, no. Before I get to that, a little earlier in the film, Alice had stumbled across a gas station looking for supplies. She opens up a door, and there's a dead carcass in there with hundreds of flies. And she finds this journal, and inside the journal, it was somebody had apparently written inside of it saying pretty much there is isolation from the infection and there is free of infection in Alaska, which I do think makes sense because Alaska is a pretty sparsely populated place. Not to mention it's cold. There's a lot of places that you would need only like a chopper or a plane to get there, so that does make sense. And also, Alice loses her motorcycle when she has a fitful dream where her psionic powers cause everything to float, and when she wakes up, the motorcycle, which is in the air, comes crashing down. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Alice, at this point, her powers had massively um, progressed. And they've... I don't know. God damn it, what the hell's the word? Her powers are very advanced at this point. She has enhanced strength, enhanced... Like, more so than in the previous film. She has enhanced strength, enhanced reflexes, enhanced agility, enhanced speed. Her senses are more acute, and she also has psionic abilities, the main one being telekinesis. However, they're still kind of, what's the word, underdeveloped, and she has a kind of a hard time controlling them. By the way, at the beginning of this movie, not the beginning, but the main plot of this movie does take place 5 years after the events of Resident Evil Apocalypse. So, let's see. Oh yeah, Claire Redfield's convoy is attacked by a giant flock of mutated, infected crows who had been feeding on infected flesh, and they have since succumbed to the effects of the T-virus. They're not really mutated, and they're grotesque crows. But they're just crows with really nasty, veiny, bulgy eyes, and they have a taste for human flesh. Of course. The group is attacked, and I swear it's straight out of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. It's a pretty exciting scene. The crows almost overwhelm the convoy, killing Nurse Betty and Otto and taking out a flamethrower operator. One of the trucks had a flamethrower attached to it. However, when this guy goes down, the flamethrower goes out of control, and Carlos is about to be roasted to death while he's protecting some woman from the crows. However, Alice shows up and uses her telekinesis to basically create a gigantic sky inferno of fire using her psionic abilities, killing all the crows. However, and I don't mean kills them, she literally incinerates them. Like it's kind of like a bit of a scene out of Silent Hill. Well, mostly I'm making that comparison because I'm watching Jordan Underneath's videos of Silent Hill month. Anyway, another reason I say these powers are underdeveloped is that if she uses them too much, they're a big strain on her nervous system, and after using this ability, she lapses into unconsciousness. She wakes up a couple days later to find the group has sort of recovered. They've buried their dead. She reunites with Carlos and meets Claire, and Claire tells them, "We're grateful for your help, but the people here are scared of you," which I wouldn't even remotely say that. I would just say, can you just please try to keep your powers in control? But anyway, while all this is going on, Dr. Alexander Isaacs from the previous film has been trying to develop a serum using Alice's blood. He's mainly only been using the clones. He's trying to develop a serum to, not really as a cure, but to more like reverse the effects of the T-virus on zombies, to not make them human, but to give them more human-like traits and basically domesticate them and make them docile. With kind of, sort of, not really limited success. There's one scene where he has a zombie injected with a prototype serum, and at first it seems to be domesticated, but then as it's trying to figure out a little kitty puzzle box, it gets frustrated when a piece doesn't go in. He loses his shit and he kills 2 Umbrella scientists. That's really the only scene in this movie that scared me when I was a kid. Even at this time, I was deathly afraid of zombies. This movie didn't really scare me that much. That's kind of one of my issues with this movie, but I'll get to that a little later. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, and he has a meeting with Umbrella officials throughout the world, including, what's his name? The first appearance of Albert Wesker from Resident Evil 1. A big fan favorite character in Resident Evil lore. Not that I blame him. Wesker's a pretty badass villain. And wants Isaacs to continue with his research on domesticating the zombies, but he kind of wants to rush things along. Isaac says, I need the original Project Alice. He needs the real Alice in order to really kick his research into high gear. Apparently clones aren't really the thing, the thing that he can use, which does make sense. The clones are just copies. It's not the original thing. Umbrella triangulates Alice's location when she uses her psionic powers to kill the crows, and Isaacs decides to set out a convoy to try to capture her against Wesker's orders. And the group decides to head for Alaska. However, they have to stop by Las Vegas in order to resupply their food, gas, and ammo, because it's virtually non-existent by this point. When they arrive at Vegas, they encounter a large storage container, and it's broken open and revealed to be full of super zombies, which kind of have Alice's superhuman traits. They're a lot faster, they're a little stronger, and they're a little more agile, and they will just tear you to pieces. They're like the zombies out of the Dawn of the Dead remake. And Alice and some of the convoy members fight the super zombies off, but many are killed, including Mikey and Chase. Umbrella tries to shut down Alice remotely during the carnage, because apparently they can do that, but she breaks free of their programming and continues to fight. She nearly captures Dr. Isaacs, but he becomes infected by a super zombie, and he flees the scene via a chopper. However, Alice and Kmart decide to use the leftover computer gear and track the helicopter's location, and they find the shack in the middle of the Mojave Desert. The convoy heads over to the site, which is, of course, still surrounded by hundreds of thousands of zombies, and Carlos decides to sacrifice himself to get them inside this little shack, because during the fight with the super zombies, LJ had succumbed to his zombie bite and transformed and bitten Carlos, which he easily could have avoided if he wore some type of armor on his shoulders. Instead, he just leaves them completely bare. Fucking stupid. So he takes a tanker truck and blows the motherfucker up with a couple sticks of dynamite, and allows the rest of the convoy inside the fence so they can take the chopper and fly to Alaska. Alice decides to stay behind and infiltrates the Umbrella facility. While this was going on, Dr. Isaacs was kept under house arrest inside the compound, and due to the increased strength of the super zombies, the T-virus is also a little stronger, so it could spread through your system a lot quicker, so he injects himself with a massive amount of the antivirus. Captain Alexander Slater, who kind of had a stick up his ass regarding Isaacs, I guess he doesn't like that Wesker is giving him all the good stuff, decides to kill Isaacs because he deems him as out of control. However, when he's shot, since he overdoses on the antivirus, this causes him to mutate into a fan favorite monster from the games, the Tyrant. I think the Tyrant's just kind of okay, but that's just me. Um, let's see. Despite retaining his intelligence and thought, Isaacs kills Slater and all the facility employees. However, the AI system of this facility is the sister to the Red Queen from the first film, known as the White Queen. When Alice enters, she sees a whole bunch of carnage, people impaled on spikes, destroyed equipment all over the place. The lights are all broken and spazzing out. Alice encounters the White Queen, and she tells him, we have a little bit of a problem, which being Dr. Isaacs. But we have equipment here where if we get some of your blood, the entire world can be fixed and the T-virus can be wiped out. Alice agrees to take care of Dr. Isaacs, and on her way to the lab's lower levels, which the Red Queen, or not Red Queen, but the White Queen had him contained, Alice discovers one of her Alice clones, which is still in development. However, she interrupts its stasis, and it seemingly dies in her arms. Right after that, she encounters Isaacs, fully mutated into his tyrant form, and also runs into a replica of the mansion set from the first film, and engages in a fight with Isaacs in tyrant form. However, they seem to be pretty much equal in both strength and telekinetic prowess. However, the clone turns out to not be dead, wakes up and kills Isaacs by tricking him into the laser grid, and he is cross-cut just like the leader of the commandos in the first film. Later in Tokyo, Japan, Wesker, who is now the head of the Tokyo Umbrella facility, tells the rest of the chairman of the company that the North American facility is lost, pretty much, but Alice shows up on hologram and makes an appearance, declaring that she is coming for the rest of Umbrella, and she's bringing some of her friends, being the rest of the Alice clones, which turns out to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So how about this plot? I both like it, and I also do kind of see why some people don't like this movie as much, because one of the... Actually, no, I'll save that. I'll just say this now. This is when the series really, really, really started to stray from the video games. Up until for the first two films, yeah, it was different, but especially with Apocalypse, they were really drawing from the games in a very good way. However, it's from this point on when the series starts to become more original material. For better or for worse, I would definitely like to see more faithful adaptations of the Resident Evil games and make it more into a cohesive timeline, because the timeline of the video games is absolutely insane. There's so many mid-stories and prequels and mid-prequels and mid-sequels. It's out of control. I think at this point the Resident Evil timeline is almost as fucked up as the Legend of Zelda timeline. But anyway, so what are the pros of Resident Evil Extinction? The pacing of the film is overall very good. I wouldn't say it's quite as fast-paced as the previous film. It does have its moments where it does slow down a little bit and take its time to develop more as a film. But overall, this movie is pretty quickly paced and definitely feels more like an action movie. This is also really when the series started to really stray from horror. Especially with the next three films, Afterlife, Retribution, and especially Final Chapter, they're not even remotely horror movies. This is the last one that has horror elements in it, in my opinion. Because this one has a couple scary moments in it, but outside of that, this is mainly an action movie. But still, the pacing overall is still very good. I never really get bored watching this movie. I'm just totally immersed into the world of Resident Evil Extinction. The action scenes, pro number 2, I think are the best of the entire series. Granted, I do also like them in Afterlife and especially in Retribution, but I think these are the best action scenes in the entire series. And I'm not saying that because this is my favorite. I really do think these are the best. This is when Alice is at the peak of her badassness. Because this is when she reaches the peak of her powers, if you ask me. Because in the next film and the film after that, she is just a normal human. And while she technically does have her powers for a majority of Part 6, you could have fooled me. I mean, if they just removed the little snippets of dialogue saying she still has her powers, I would have still thought she was human. But I'll get to that later when I review Final Chapter. Overall, the action scenes are so badass. The best scene in the entire movie is the ambush fight with the super zombies. Alice is mainly the one that kicks a lot of the zombie ass because she unleashes 2 Kukri blades. Now, for those of you who don't know, Kukri blades are kind of like short machetes. They have a... Here, I'll show you a design. Here's the basic design of a Kukri blade. That's a kind of a shitty drawing, but that's what they look like. The sharp edge is along here. They're basically... I've seen them range from about this long to about this long, and they're basically just hack and slash knives. They're not really used for stabbing. They're heavy, heavy knives, and she just cleaves the ever-living shit out of these super zombies. She decapitates some. She does wushu whirlwinds and slices some in half. Impales some and eviscerates some. Oh my god, she is just such a total badass with these 2 knives. It's a shame that this is the only movie where she ever uses them. And it seems whenever she gets her hands on melee weapons, they're quickly discarded in this series for some fucking reason, which is a damn shame. In the first movie... Well, no, she didn't really have any in the first film, but in a previous film, it was kind of marketed to make her look like she wielded 2 police collapsible batons, but she really only uses those in her fight against Nemesis and also against the guards at the helicopter in City Hall. But here she has her Kukri knives. Damn, is she a badass with these things. The action scenes still overall in the rest of the film are really fun. Her fight with Tyrant at the end, it's a little short for my liking, but it still is pretty damn badass. The music to this movie is also really, really good. Whereas in the second movie, it was just kind of standard horror action movie music. They use a lot of recycled, not really recycled, but sort of recycled / modified tracks from the first Resident Evil. Like the theme that they had at the end of the first movie it's remade in this movie. It sounds kind of more actiony and badassery, and it's so cool. This movie, tied with Afterlife, has my favorite soundtrack of the Resident Evil films, and it's so glorious. It's a little somber at times. It accentuates the action scenes. And overall, it gives this movie a more epic / almost peaceful feel. Like this movie really is trying to be more than it is. Not in a bad way either. Special effects are also very good too. There's a lot of because these zombies look more like Walking Dead zombies. There's a lot more practical effects used for their makeup. Like there are some zombies that have their clothes that are rotten and hanging off their figures. Their skin is gray and darkened with the sun, and their hair is totally unkempt. Their eyes are sunken in, their teeth are nasty. These zombies really do look like they've been out in the sun for years and years. And they do look nasty. The makeup effects for Tyrant, you don't see as much of... Well, actually, no, that's not true. At first, they sort of try to hide his design by keeping him in the darkness, but then there are scenes where he's out in the open, And I don't find it as impressive as Nemesis, but I definitely do think that they did a good job with realizing Tyrant on screen, because he doesn't quite look like he steps out of the first Resident Evil, but if you were to look at it and be like a minor Resident Evil fan, you would instantly say that's Tyrant. And it is a guy made up in a suit, though they definitely use a lot more of CGI to augment the suit, but it still looks good. Like mainly the only times they use CG is when he gets a wound, like a slash wound, and it heals itself, which that looks fine. And also when he elongates his fingers, that's obviously CG, but it doesn't look terrible. It certainly doesn't look cartoony, that's for sure. And also the mutated crows, those are all used with CG. However, I completely understand that, because obviously you can't really slaughter an entire murder of crows. And yes, that's what a flock of crows is called. It's called a murder of crows, because you'd have animal rights activists up the ass if you ever did that. So it's very obvious that the crows are CG, but I completely understand why. So those look fine. The cinematography... Actually, no, before I get to that, the characters in this movie are also pretty decent. Alice doesn't really say much in this movie, but I kind of feel like in this movie, her actions speak a lot louder than words, because she's at the peak of her badassness in this film. That more than makes up for it. Ali Larter does a pretty good job as Claire Redfield, but she also doesn't do as much. But she still plays the part well, though I definitely think she reaches her peak as Claire in the next movie. Oded Fehr does a good job as Carlos. The guy who plays LJ, he's good, but he doesn't feel like LJ. Overall, the characters in this movie aren't amazing. Like, they're not as good as the previous film, but they're still passable, and they still do their jobs right. Sorry, that's my brother. And also the last good thing I have to say about this movie is that the cinematography for this film is beautiful. Utterly beautiful. There's a lot of really wide and long open shots of the Mojave Desert landscape, and it looks absolutely beautiful. And there's a lot of scenes that take place down in the Umbrella facility that are very reminiscent of the first film. And they look absolutely gorgeous. I love looking at these sets, and especially later in the film when Tyrant has gone on a rampage. There's a lot of really dark and shadowy images where there's lights that are broken and flickering on and off. It gives a really creepy and moody atmosphere. But the best cinematography is definitely the stuff that takes place outside, that just shows off the desert landscape. It's absolutely gorgeous. One of my favorite scenes is after Alice loses her motorcycle, she's walking amongst the desert landscape. She has her sun goggles on, and she has like a face mask on. And apparently, I think in the audio commentary they said they got this shot either early in the morning or like late in the afternoon, but the sun is like gently covering the sand dunes with light, so it's just a very beautiful shot. Cinematography in this movie is very, 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 very pretty. So with all this good stuff to say about Resident Evil Extinction, are there any cons? For me, there's just two, but they're pretty minor. One is that, I stated this already, this is when the series really starts to stray away from the games. This movie doesn't really draw any plot elements from any one specific game. This is pretty much mostly just original material. The only things that they take from Resident Evil is obviously that there's still Umbrella. There's the appearance of Albert Wesker from Resident Evil 1. Tyrant from Resident Evil 1. And I think... Oh, I also think actually, no. The mutated crows, I think, are from Resident Evil 2. But outside of that, this movie is pretty much its own original thing, which some may see as good. Actually, no, most may see that as bad, but some may see that as good. I'm personally a little bit in the middle. I would have liked for them to take a little bit more inspiration from the games, but we have what we have, and I'm perfectly fine with it. And also, I don't like the fact they kill off Carlos. He was great in 2. He's good here, but he just doesn't seem like he has enough to do. None of the characters honestly feel like they have enough to do, aside from just be badasses and progress the plot. God damn it, progress the plot. But I really don't like the way they kill off Carlos. I think it's really stupid. It's a complete cop out. It's a lazy way of knocking out somebody who people will get attached to and will like, as I did. I love Carlos. He's total badass. That's all I really have to say about Resident Evil Extinction. I thought I don't have as much to say about this movie, other than the fact that I love the crap out of this film. Despite the couple problems, I'm going to give this movie a perfect 10 out of 10. I love this movie to absolute death. It's my favorite of the Resident Evil series. I love watching it every single time. And also, something I forgot to mention. The first 3 films, at least, and also 5, have really good audio commentaries. The first film has a commentary with Mila Jovovich, Michelle Rodriguez, and Paul Anderson. It's a really fun commentary. It's kind of funny. Part 2, or Apocalypse, has 2 commentaries. The one I listened to is with the chick who plays Jill Valentine. Can't remember her name, I'm sorry. Mila Oded Fair, and that's it. That's the one I listened to, and it's really, really funny. It's pretty insightful. And this movie has a commentary with the director, Paul W. Sanderson, who was a producer on this movie, didn't direct it. And I think that's about it. Or maybe the writer as well. And it's pretty informative, and it gives you a lot of information about how they made the film, and also what they're drawing inspiration from the games with. But the commentaries in the first 3 movies are really, really solid. So a perfect 10 out of 10. This is my favorite Resident Evil film. Not counting Resident Evil Degeneration. I'll get to that when I review those films. So 10 out of 10. It's my favorite of the series. So post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. And, as always, I will see you in the next video with Resident Evil Afterlife.